Hi everyone, so for this video we have a writing problem again. And remember, for this part of the test, we don't really know much about what the problem is asking us until we actually look at it. So let's see what we have for this one. All right, so once again, we have our standard generic question. And looking at our answer choices, what do we think this question might be asking us to do? So we call this a coordination question, just because of the fact that it's a little bit difficult to pick out exactly what the question is asking us. But in this case, it looks like it could be maybe punctuation, but some of the options don't really have punctuation, and option C has an additional word in it. So we call this coordination because essentially we need to figure out what sort of context, what do we need in this blank in the passage to make it grammatically correct, essentially. So let's take a look here. We have researchers studying magnetosensation, wow, that's a big word, have determined why some soil-dwelling roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for blank. In the northern hemisphere, the magnetic field points down into the ground, but in the southern hemisphere, it points up toward the surface and away from worms' food sources. Okay, so we just have to go through our choices here and figure out what's happening. So since we do have a couple of options here with some punctuation, we want to think about both what kind of clause comes before the punctuation and what kind of clause comes after. So let's take a look at this kind of break in the passage that happens right here. So they have determined why some roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food. All right, so with this clause that we have in the first half here, be independent or dependent. So it's going to be independent. We have a full, complete thought here. We have the subject, we have verbs, it's a complete thought. We know exactly what's happening. So, okay, we have an independent clause before any potential punctuation here. And let's just check after. So after we have in the northern hemisphere, the magnetic field points down into the ground. In the southern hemisphere, it points up toward the surface and away from worms' food sources. Okay, so here we also have an independent clause, right? So right now we have two independent clauses with this kind of blank in the middle that we're trying to fill in. So knowing that we have two independent clauses here, can we get rid of any choices? So I'm specifically looking at B. So for B, we have for food, comma, then the second half of the passage. So since we would then have an independent clause, comma, independent clause, what is wrong with that? That's going to be called a comma splice, right? When we have two independent clauses joined by a comma is not strong enough to do that. That would be grammatically incorrect, so we can get rid of B. And then I'm also looking at D. For D, we don't have any punctuation, it just goes right into it. So that doesn't really seem right either. We do have a stop here. We can hear it when we say it out loud. So it doesn't make sense to go straight into it. This would be a run-on sentence. It would be way too long, way too much information. So that wouldn't make sense there. We do need some sort of separation between these two clauses. So then let's see C. So food while. Let's read that. So the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food, while in the northern hemisphere, the magnetic field points down into the ground, but in the southern hemisphere, it points up toward the surface and away from worms' food sources. So does the word while make sense in this context? So it does not, right? It's setting up, a bit of a comparison here, but what comes after, like this second half of the passage, what is this doing in effect compared to the first half? So this half is essentially providing the explanation for this claim that these researchers are making about why these worms move in the opposite direction of the magnetic field. So it doesn't make sense to set up this weird comparison here, especially because we already have a pretty extensive explanation in the second half. So C doesn't make sense, and that just leaves us with A, which is going to be our correct answer, but let's talk really quick about the colon here. So what do we know about the colon? So with the colon, we always need to have an independent clause before it, which we do in this case, so that is perfect. It doesn't really matter what kind of clause comes after, but what does come after needs to be some sort of list or explanation, something for emphasis that is related to the first clause and, kind of expanding on it in some way. And we do in fact have that here. Like I just said, we're talking about this finding that the researchers have made and then providing a detailed explanation of exactly what they mean by that. So the colon works perfectly, and A is definitely going to be our right choice.